Hello, this is the video lesson for Thursday, the 12th of November 2020, as well as the in-person lesson. This is going to be a fairly short video because most of what you're going to do today and tomorrow is watch the movie Cromwell. Now, in normal times, I would just be showing you clips from the movie Cromwell. But the clips are so complex. The scenes that I want you to see and the transitions between them are something that I normally will explain to people. I'm not going to be able to do that, so I'm just going to have you see the whole film. So the majority of your time today and tomorrow will be watching this movie. It was made in 1970, and it's about what I'm about to set you up for, the English Civil War. We talked about this yesterday. There are religious cleavages between Puritans and Anglicans, who are both Protestants, and Catholics. There are ethnic tensions between English, Scots, and Irish. The Welsh are pretty much English at this point. At least they're not a real problem. And there are political tensions. You'll remember from yesterday's quote from the True Laws of Monarchy by King James Stuart, King James the First of England, who's also James the Sixth of Scotland, that he believes that kings are like unto gods, because like gods, they have the power to rise up and cast down, they have the power of life and death, they have the power to make laws, and they have the power to be judges over all, but judged by none except God himself. And the king said, let me be very clear. I may at times explain why I make the choices I do, but I'm not going to make any pretense of sharing the power to decide. That power was inherited by me. It was given to me by God himself, and I will not be schooled in my office. I will not be told how to be a ruler by people who have no notion of what it is to be a ruler because they weren't born to be. So don't school me in my office. Don't tell me how to do my job. Don't pretend to try to criticize established law because you're supposed to be submissive to that law, submissive to authority, submissive to my royal authority. That is your duty and your job and your lot as my subjects. You are parts of the body. I am the head. Now that attitude runs counter to an English tradition that goes back before Magna Carta. The German tribes saw themselves, when they fought the Romans and when they established the kingdoms in Dark Age Europe, as free men under a king that they choose to follow. They carried a spear willingly for a king they choose to follow. But the king in return must respect their rights as free men. Now, we as Americans have a difficult time grasping the notion that a person in a monarchy can be free. But the Germanic tribes and later the Anglo-Saxons and later the English had no trouble. We have certain rights under the law, and it's the king's job to secure and protect those rights. That's the old medieval tradition of kingship. It fuses the Christian notion that a leader is there to serve the needs of those who follow him, as well as the Germanic Anglo-Saxon notion that the subjects of a king that are not slaves or foreigners are free. And that freedom is something that the government respects and protects. And it's that notion that we are free, we choose to follow our leaders, that our government is there to protect that freedom, that is going to become so important in the Enlightenment philosophies, the American Revolution and the French Revolution, and into modern times. So James's notion and his son Charles's notion, because Charles takes the same attitude, is a very alien thing to the English. It may play in Scotland, which is a much smaller kingdom that has a very different political tradition. The Scots tend to be Gaelic or Irish. In fact, the Scots come from Ireland. They took over Scotland in the Dark Ages. They have a different tradition. And this new idea of absolutism coming out of Asia, which we're going to talk more about next week, is also something that inspires King James and his notions on monarchy. this is going to be a serious problem. And all of this is going to come to a head in a civil war that is going to bring a Puritan to the fore named Oliver Cromwell. Cromwell was considering leaving England to join the colony in Massachusetts Bay or at Plymouth. But in the end, he gets drawn in. And one of the things that draws Cromwell in is something called the enclosure movement, which is a bit of economic history that you will have read about. In the Middle Ages, on every fief, which is basically every village ruled by a local lord, there is the common land. The common land is usually left for pasturage, so that everyone who has farm animals who need grass can pasture their flocks and their herds on the common land. This is expected, this is normal, this is part of the rights, the natural rights of being an Englishman. This goes back as long as anyone can remember. It is the basic tradition that you have a system whereby you grow on a three-field system: grains, vegetables, fallow, which means you leave it fallow, you leave it to the soil to recover its nutrients, and then the next year your three-field switch. But you also have the common land. And often the common land includes fallow land, but it also includes land that just isn't suitable for farming, but it is suitable for pasturage, for grazing. But the king changes these laws. The enclosure movement has the common land enclosed by new property owners who deny the people their traditional rights. And in denying those rights, they say, you never owned this land. The king has made a determination that this common land is no longer common, and he has chosen to bequest it or bequeath it to people that he chose. And those people choose to fence off the land. When my wife and I were looking for a house back in Maine about 20 years ago, we looked at a house that was beautiful in many respects, but there was a weird path. We were looking in wintertime in the snow in the front yard, across the front yard, and towards our side yard, which had a bit of a dimple in the earth. And what the realtor said is, oh yeah, the local snowmobile club uses this. And they have, traditionally just had permission by the people who live there to ride across the front lawn and to use part of the side lawn to do, all sorts of snowmobile tricks. And we quietly, but very definitely walked away from that because the thought of agreeing to let a bunch of strangers ride snowmobiles on our land where we would be legally liable if they injured themselves, and just because we didn't want that, it was completely unappealing. We would have fenced it off. And if we had bought the land and fenced it off, that would have made us enemies with the local snowmobile club. And that's not a great way to start out in a new neighborhood. So, the enclosure movement is one thing that provokes Cromwell. And, well, I could tell you more about it, but I'd rather have you see the beginning of the movie here. It'll be available online, and if I assign a worksheet, which I may assign, it'll be available online as well. It'll be fairly simple and straightforward. Any questions? Okay, then thank you very much.